Hello and welcome to part number 5, shooting for camera projection. And that is, of course, a longer scene than I can present it here in this little making of. And of course, this is not an instructional tutorial. But what I want to give you here is, of course, how I set things up and how my mind works for that. What is my ideal? And of course, where I see the borders of this ideal. What I have shown you in the first scene is, of course, just for fun. It was not a client idea, but it could go in this way. And so we have to stay flexible because projects develop over time and they change maybe drastically. With camera projection, we have the most advantage to change things because it's nothing really baked into whatever camera move is. What I want to bring home here in this little making of is the mindset, and that means I try to shoot, if possible, always from the position where the camera is on the last position after it has moved. That means that the camera, and I show that here, this camera here in Cinema 4D and the camera that we have retrieved as position is exactly the same or very close. If it is exactly the same, we can project the image to any geometry and it will look right. And with any geometry, I want to bring home the point that when we have here even the sloppy version, which are called here sloppy, just a few cards that I have put together in, I think, 1 or 2 minutes, really. Just put them in, done. They are not precise, they are not right, they are not in the way I would love to have it, but they give the illusion that it works. And when we start maybe from a position like here, which is too extreme for this picture with the geometry, then we can see here already the problems. But I have overdone it here to bring home this point. In the moment you are a little bit more precise, you get away with a lot of stuff, because when the audience enters this little clip here, then it has to take first of all the prominent data in, and that is maybe the foreground object, maybe a fighter in the scene or something like that. And then after a while it becomes more familiar with the background, and the background gets more and more perfect. That is the philosophy that I have. Not starting with a perfect picture where no one really can grasp it in that moment, and then go maybe to something that has some problems in it. Okay, I know some people love to spend weeks and recreate every single geometry in it. I would say then go and shoot for texture and not for camera projection, because then it loses its point, its advantage. The idea is to get a lot of stuff and create an illusion. Okay, let's go a little bit into the resolution discussion and in the various aspects of it. And for this I want to go over to our footage, because that's the master, the foreground. And when we have an area like this here that we want to replace, and we have already an idea that we want to do it for UHD or 4K, then we can already very simply measure what kind of footage we need in the background. And again, when we have footage for the foreground, then each pixel will be a pixel represented later on, because it's just 2D and it will composite it. But for the background, we have something like a texture, and that means it works in space with a camera move, and that means every pixel becomes mixed up with another pixel. There's most likely nearly never ever a case where pixels becomes pixels one-to-one. So the rule of thumb is, of course, to have the size of this area here 1.5 times higher at least, and that's the minimum. It should be higher, of course. And given the fact that we have here 4K, we have here maybe something between 1.5 and 2K times 1.5. So we are on the safe side if we have a DSLR with over 5K in width. And that is, of course, the case when we go here over to the picture. That was 5616 wide. The most important part is, of course, that we have fidelity in every pixel. That means that we have no crushed blacks here, or that we have clipped whites. If you can't work in Pro Photo, which comes closer to Rec 2020, then at least use Adobe RGB. sRGB is too small to get really quality. And of course, 16-bit per pixel. And I know most cameras have maybe 14, maybe 12, or even only 10-bit analog digital converters in it. 4K certainly pushes the boundaries in the future much more than we have seen with SD or HD. And we have no noise here, which is also a very big idea, because noise would be then projected on the objects. Not a good idea. I use a low ISO because I am a firm believer that any ISO push is just a mathematical distortion of the material that you have. High ISO is nothing that the sensor produces. It's just something that the camera produces in the CPU that it has. So for me, always the lowest ISO. And what I want to discuss here is, of course, this area here could be also photographed from the left and from the right side. This would increase, of course, the work, but also the resolution. And we would have the need maybe to shoot one time the floor here. So we have 3 shots instead of 1. We have to do it when we don't use a nodal point. We have to create 3 times the camera position and then stitch the image inside of Cinema 4D. I wouldn't stitch it in an application because that moves pixels around and that destroys the quality. One word to the f-stop. I used here f.5 to get a decent depth of field, and that is nearly the sweet spot of that lens. Not really, but that was for the overall scene certainly the best idea. So, and that sums it up already. It's of course not a complete story, but what I want to show you here is of course the lens grid that I normally use, and just shoot one time to see that you have a lens that has no lens distortion, because I think we all know we can repair lens distortion, but it reduces the quality at least by 50% from my point of view. Not a good idea, and it is not possible to use sharpening then later on, because what we want to have for camera projection is no noise, no chromatic aberration, no lens distortion, no sharpening, just pure data. Okay, thanks for listening. Have fun with it. Bye-bye.